Welcome, listeners, to today's episode where we'll dive into a fascinating chapter of Southwest desert history that combines scientific exploration, ambitious dreams, and heated controversy. Our story takes us back to the late 19th century, to the scorching expanse of the Colorado Desert, where one man's observation sparked a nationwide debate about transforming an arid wasteland into a vast inland sea. Our tale begins with Dr. J.P. Widney, a U.S. Army surgeon who found himself traversing the harsh landscape of the Colorado Desert. As he rode his horse through this unforgiving terrain, little did he know that his observations would soon capture the imagination of a nation and earn this desolate basin the moniker of the Widney Sea. In January 1873, Dr. Whitney published an article in the Overland Monthly, describing a peculiar sight that caught his eye during his desert expeditions. He noticed a consistent, well-defined line along the mountainsides, reminiscent of an ancient shoreline. Upon closer inspection, he found evidence that supported his theory of a long-lost sea in this now parched land. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman, Alan. Please leave a like, comment, and share. For further desert adventures, hit the subscribe button. Whitney's keen eye observed rocks worn smooth up to a certain level, as if by the constant washing of water. He noted coarse coral formations in the crevices and on the sides of these rocks. Above this line, the rocks remained sharp and jagged, untouched by the hypothetical waters of this ancient sea. But it wasn't just the rocks that piqued Whitney's interest. Along what he believed to be the former shoreline, he discovered countless seashells. Some were minute, others fragile, resembling the kind one might find in sheltered arms of the sea. He was particularly struck by delicate bivalves, about an inch wide and an inch and a half long, with shells barely thicker than a few sheets of paper. As a man of medicine, Dr. Whitney was accustomed to reasoning from effect to cause. Holding these fragile shell fragments in his hands, he couldn't help but ponder their origin and survival. How could these delicate remnants withstand the constant battering of wind and sand? He estimated that they could not have endured for more than a few centuries at most. This observation led Whitney to a startling conclusion. He was standing on the bed of a relatively recently vanished sea. He envisioned a time when the land bloomed and flourished, a stark contrast to the current landscape where lone whirlwinds raised columns of sand hundreds of feet into the air. After multiple explorations of this thermal waste, as he called it, Whitney developed a theory about the formation and disappearance of this inland sea. He proposed that the Colorado River, which empties into the Gulf of California, had spent centuries depositing the red mud from Arizona's northern plateaus at its mouth. Over time, this process created a massive delta that eventually cut off the desert basin from the Gulf. Once isolated, the trapped water slowly evaporated, leaving behind the scorched landscape Whitney observed. But Dr. Whitney wasn't content with merely theorizing about the past. He saw an opportunity to reshape the future of the American Southwest. Upon returning to Los Angeles, he began to expound his theories to the public, arguing that the drying up of this inland sea had caused significant climatic changes in the surrounding regions. Whitney's proposal was bold and visionary: restore the ancient sea. He contended that by bringing back this massive body of water, beneficial climatic conditions would return to the stricken areas. Even California, already blessed with a favorable climate, would see positive effects. Rainfall, he argued, would increase substantially. To support his claims, Whitney provided some striking calculations. He estimated that evaporation from this restored sea would be enough to supply 12 inches of rain to an area more than double the size of Ohio, if all the moisture were to be recondensed and precipitated. As one might expect, Whitney's proposal was met with immediate skepticism and criticism. Critics scoffed at the idea of humans making a sea, some even calling it blasphemous. But Whitney had an answer ready: divert the Colorado River into the basin. He acknowledged that the flow of the Colorado might not be sufficient to fill the entire basin, but argued that even partially filling the northern portion would help mitigate the desiccating winds born in this desert furnace. The local press quickly latched onto the story, sensing its news value. The Los Angeles Star trumpeted Widney's ideas, calling for Congress to appoint a scientific commission to study the practicality, cost, and potential effects of the project. The newspaper praised Whitney's views as sound in every particular and urged California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah delegations in Congress to demand government action. As news of Whitney's proposal spread, it captured the public imagination. The Widney Sea became a hot topic of conversation across the nation, discussed in parlors, barbershops, and bars. The scientific community took notice as well, with at least one college conferring a master's degree on Dr. Whitney for his contribution to science in the nation. Learned debates erupted among savants, arguing the merits and potential pitfalls of the plan. Some enthusiastic supporters advocated for the immediate formation of a company to begin digging a canal from the Colorado River to the basin, eager to start filling this natural bathtub without delay. Others pushed for cartographic changes, insisting that all maps should be updated to reflect the future Widney Sea rather than the outdated Colorado Desert. But not everyone was convinced. Skeptics raised concerns about potential negative consequences. Some worried that increased moisture in the air would lead to a rise in malaria cases. Others speculated about the effects on local flora and fauna, conjuring images of orange trees growing to the height of sequoias and bearing pumpkin-sized fruit, or harmless garter snakes evolving into menacing boa constrictors. The controversy surrounding the Widney Sea proposal soon caught the attention of political figures. None other than General John C. Fremont, then serving as the governor of Arizona Territory, took an interest in the matter. Known as the Pathfinder for his earlier explorations of the American West, Fremont saw potential in the idea and decided to bring it to the attention of the federal government. Fremont embarked on a journey to Washington, D.C. to present the subject to his superiors. His involvement lent credibility to Whitney's proposal and elevated the discussion to a national level. The prospect of transforming a vast desert into a productive region captured the imagination of many politicians who saw it as a way to expand America's agricultural and economic frontiers. While the debate raged on, fueled by a mix of scientific speculation, economic ambition, and pure fantasy, one crucial aspect had been overlooked: the mathematical feasibility of the project. It took General George Stoneman, a practical-minded resident of Los Angeles, to bring some much-needed perspective to the discussion. Addressing a shocked audience in Los Angeles, Stoneman laid out the stark realities of the proposed project. He started by outlining the dimensions of the basin, as described by proponents of the Widney Sea, 300 miles long, 50 miles wide, and 300 feet deep, roughly the size of Lake Erie. Then, Stoneman dropped his bombshell. To fill such a basin in just 1 year, assuming a watertight bottom and no evaporation, would require a stream 20 miles wide, 20 feet deep, with a current of 3 miles an hour. Put another way, using a more realistic stream size of 1,000 feet wide, 10 feet deep, and running at 3 miles an hour, it would take 200 years to fill the basin. But the general wasn't done yet. He pointed out that even after filling this massive lake, it would require a constant inflow of water to compensate for evaporation. His calculations showed that a river about the size of the Colorado at ordinary stages, 250 feet wide, 10 feet deep, and flowing at 5 miles per hour, would be needed just to offset the estimated 18 inches of yearly evaporation. Stoneman's mathematical analysis effectively burst the bubble of the Widney Sea dream. He humorously compared Whitney's proposal to Archimedes' famous claim about moving the world with a lever and fulcrum, suggesting that Whitney believed he could create a sea if only given enough greenbacks or government funding. The general concluded his reality check with a poignant observation. He suggested that long before any human effort could fill the basin with water, the great engineer of the universe, nature itself, would have filled it with the sands of the desert, driven by the prevailing northern winds. While some might quibble with the precise accuracy of Stoneman's calculations, his intervention was sufficient to dampen the enthusiasm for the sea-building project. The hard numbers he presented made it clear that the Widney Sea, however appealing in theory, was simply not feasible in practice. Although the grand vision of the Widney Sea never materialized, the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, the Colorado Desert did see significant changes, though not in the form of a vast inland sea. Irrigation projects gradually brought water to parts of the vast wasteland. Farms and ranches began to dot the desert floor, transforming areas that were once thought uninhabitable. Cities like Coachella, Indio, Brawley, El Centro, and Calexico sprouted up, bringing the touch of human civilization to a land that Dr. Whitney had described as filled with only the glare of the never-ending sand and the silence of death. Looking back on the Widney Sea controversy, we can see it as a fascinating chapter in the history of the American West. It represents a unique intersection of scientific observation, ambitious engineering, environmental speculation, and public imagination. Dr. Whitney's proposal, while ultimately impractical, speaks to the spirit of his time, an era when the vast expanses of the American West seemed to invite grand schemes and transformative projects. It was a period when the power of human engineering was beginning to reshape landscapes on an unprecedented scale, and the idea of creating an inland sea didn't seem entirely outlandish. The story also highlights the importance of rigorous scientific and mathematical analysis in evaluating such grand proposals. General Stoneman's intervention serves as a reminder of the value of clear-headed, quantitative thinking in the face of exciting but potentially unrealistic ideas. Moreover, the Widney Sea controversy foreshadowed many of the environmental and engineering debates that would come to characterize the 20th and 21st centuries. Questions about the wisdom and feasibility of large-scale environmental modification, the potential unintended consequences of such projects, and the balance between human ambition and natural limitations continue to be relevant today. Today, if you were to visit the site where Dr. Whitney once sat atop his horse, scanning the red rock cliffs, you would find that, in many ways, the silence of the desert still reigns. The vast inland sea he envisioned never came to be, and it's unlikely that the silence will ever be broken by the wash of waves on a shoreline. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a fascinating chapter of American Southwest history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop dreaming big, but always remember to check your math. Please leave a like, comment, and share. For further desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Happy trails!